Welcome everyone to KMicro's Fortify Dynamics 365 webinar. I am really excited to have our guests on today and all of our attendees. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. My name is Jeremy McLaren. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at KMicro. And we wanted to make sure that you know as you come in how to participate in this webinar. We don't necessarily want this to be a webinar that is just us presenting information, but we value the participation and questions from our audience. So we'll start by actually doing a little bit of a poll and getting people involved in that way, and then we'll talk about how we can also get you involved with questions, answers, and comments as well. So I first want to start out with a poll question of how did you hear about this particular webinar? And there's some choices there. We've got LinkedIn, email, maybe from our partner SoftChoice, maybe one of our KMicro employees, or you saw it on Instagram, or saw one of our YouTube shorts or videos about it, or some other way. If you do choose other as your answer, I would love it if you put your answer in the chat. We're just curious from a marketing standpoint, and of course, that's one of the things I'm always interested in is how well are we doing as a marketing team? Where are you finding us from? Where are you hearing about this? It helps us know where to put our efforts and to make sure that we're doing a good job there. So got a few comments already in here, looking forward to getting everyone's responses in. We'll give you another minute to answer that. As you're doing that, I do want to mention that this webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll want to make sure that you have the ability to participate in that recording, not only through your comments, and we'll show you how to do that shortly, but also be able to share that later on. And we'll be sending out a link to the webinar recording so that you can rewatch it, maybe share it with some friends or colleagues who didn't get to participate today, and then be able to review the content that we share. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here, and let's do that. And I think we've got, wow, a good percentage of our people were referred by employees at KMicro. So that's excellent. Our employees are doing a good job there. I want to refer you to the chat section. So in Teams, there's a section called chat, and you can go in and actually type in something. I'd love to hear where you're calling in from today. Are you working from home? Are you working from, the office? What state or country you're calling in from? We've got a lot of people that are in our webinar today. I'm looking at quite a few actually. There's Gardy and Brian, John and Mason, Lauren, and is that Tomas, and Zaid, Boris, Matthew, and Michael, and Kyle, and Logan, and Pam, and John, and Faison, and Mauricio, and there's so many, Kieran, and Maxwell, and Dwayne. There's so many people jumping in. There's still more people jumping in every moment. So I think this is going to be a very, very full webinar today, and so I'm excited to get everyone in here. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat here. It looks like a lot of people coming in from their office or their home. Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's where I was born, Ian. That's excellent. I actually grew up there. Charlotte, North Carolina, says Dylan. Tara's also calling in from Charlotte, North Carolina. A lot of people coming in from home. So really appreciate Indianapolis, Indiana, and Ontario. That's great. I think you went for the furthest one away. That's awesome. So I love hearing all the various places people are coming in from. It makes it very exciting to see how people are, where they're coming in from and what we're doing. And let's get started in with some of our additional poll questions here. Let me just jump over to that. I got an additional poll question. And the reason I like the poll questions is it really helps us to set the stage for the webinar today. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we tailor this webinar to your needs, to what you're looking for, to to your situation. And if it's something that doesn't apply to you, we'd like to try and avoid that. If it's something that does apply to you, we want to make sure we focus more on it. So this particular poll question is asking, which Dynamics 365 products are you currently using? F&O, BC, CE, Power Platform. Would love to hear it. Just choose all but apply. If you're using multiple ones, put that all in there as well. So again, would love to get to see everyone's responses there. And again, it gives us kind of an idea of what we're doing. So we're recording this webinar for you for future, and we'll give you the link to that. We also want you to be able to participate. So that same function you used to tell me where you were calling in from, whether it's home or from a location or office, etc. That's the same function we'll want you to use if you have a question for one of our panelists today. Maybe we're discussing something and you have a particular situation that is exactly the kind of thing they're talking about, or a question of how that might apply to you. Put that in the chat, and we're going to try as much as possible to address any and every comment or question on the webinar today. We want to make sure that that's something that you feel, again, that this is more than just us presenting to you, but this is something that you can actually participate in, and we can make this webinar exactly what it needs to be for you. So all right, well, let's go into, I appreciate everyone doing those poll questions for us. Let's go into our actual introductions here. I'm going to start with just a quick agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about who KMicro is. We're going to address security challenges with business apps. We're going to talk about the risks. We'll talk about securing the inside as well as fortifying the outside. And we'll address Dynamics 365 security posture with advanced monitoring and alerting. So excited about this. Let's get into a little bit about KMicro, and then we'll do our introductions of our panelists today. KMicro is a trusted security advisor. We've got seasoned experts. We are armed with industry insights, and we want to make sure that you have whatever Microsoft technology, business applications you need, licensing, security, we can do it all. We specialize in modern security, Dynamics 365, modern workplace, Copilot and AI, and a lot more. We've got several business designations, including we're MXDR certified, which we're very proud of. And we're in almost every market segment. So if you're in a particular industry or market and you want to know if we can support it, we've got experience in almost every single one. So we hope that we can be able to address your specific questions and concerns on the webinar today. And if not, then one of our experts can certainly get back with you later on. I want to introduce each of our panelists today and give them a chance to introduce themselves. And Dylan, we'll start with you. You're on mute, buddy.
I'm Paul. So we're all co-working today, so I'm gonna blame everything on Paul. Just know that for the rest of the day. But no, so a little bit about me. I run all pre-sales here at KMicro. So I have the benefit of sitting between our sales and engineering teams. Fun note, I have 4 kids. So I'm always full of chaos. So if anybody wants to know or can provide me any advice on how to survive the chaos, let me know.
Yep, that's good advice. Put your parenting tips in the chat for Dylan, and we'll make sure he gets them. Paul, let's give you a chance to introduce yourself next.
Good deal. Well, the mic's already on, so it makes it a little bit easier. So, Dylan, sorry about that. But yeah, so Paul Way, I head up our Dynamics and Power Platform groups within KMicro. So happy to be here to kind of share. We've got I've been on Dynamics, been in the space for a little over about 15 years, and so as part of that, I've kind of seen some of the things of what you can get out kind of from the out-of-box auditing, things of that nature. And really when I kind of learned about some of the security stuff that we can layer on top, I got really excited. So I'm very excited of sharing about kind of some of the things and features that this brings. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. And finally, we saved the best for last. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Ian. I'm a Microsoft security architect. I like to build cool, unique solutions to protect our customers' data, and that's exactly what I get to do here at KMicro. And as a father of 2 daughters, I know a thing or two about risk management, but about half as much as Dylan over there with 4.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you again for all of you being here today. Let's start with Ian with you, if you don't mind addressing the business apps security gap for us.
Absolutely. So your business application users are not part of your security operations team, and your security operations team don't really know how your business applications are used by those users, right? They have very little visibility into the workflow. So it's there's kind of a gap there in the middle. And what this gap, what you can do with this gap is essentially this creates opportunities for several types of accidental mistakes, malicious insiders, and external attackers. Let's talk about some of the malicious insiders, and they're not all malicious. I like to talk about these. Accidental insiders are guys who, they aren't malicious, but they inadvertently create vulnerabilities that could be exploited. So somebody couldn't, well, we'll talk about some examples later on. Opportunistic insiders, unlike malicious ones, they've got premeditated intent and will take an opportunity. Disgruntled insiders are somebody like somebody who's going to get fired or someone who's getting ready to resign, and they might try to take opportunity of that window before they leave. And if they're disgruntled, they can maybe have different motivations than maybe trying to take data as much as they are trying to corrupt data and maybe try to damage some reputation, for example. And then malicious insiders are unlike either of the two. They have premeditated intent to steal, disrupt, or the whole shebang. They're the most dangerous. Have you guys ever found yourself in a situation like this where you've been an accidental insider, like maybe somebody who couldn't email something to somebody they needed to, so they just used a Gmail account as a workaround? That creates a loophole, right? You didn't mean anything by it. That's I guess the next.
Yeah, I would imagine
question,
that
right?
probably happens quite a bit. People are just trying to get their work done and trying to, make things successful, and it's, inadvertently going past it. But I guess let me ask this: like when you're implementing Dynamics 365, isn't it automatic that all the security that can be put in place is put in place, or is that what you're talking about with this gap?
So there's a lot of great out-of-the-box tools and things like that get deployed, but there's nothing as specific as what we can talk about in some of our next examples and how we should really get into the weeds about it.
All right, great. Let's go to the next slide and give us an example of the flow of what happens. If, for example, with a disgruntled employee, what happens and how bad can it get?
So it starts with well, we got to think about the signals that we're going to think about. They're different for somebody who's maybe disgruntled, so we want to pay attention to extra scrutiny for these guys. As you can see, it starts with they get the termination notice, or they somehow figure it out before they're supposed to, or they plan on resigning. Something that we would look for one of these users is start extracting CRM records, right? Like mass exports to Excel, or maybe dumping everything to an external source, such as a personal OneDrive or a Gmail or a Google Drive account or something like that. Maybe this is a ticking time bomb, this next one. The Power Automate flow to delete data, you can have that trigger after you've left the company. So that's something that they can attempt. Changing bank account numbers, that's obvious what you can do with that, right? The one that I think is the most terrifying is the sabotaging data integrity. If you think about hospitals, if you think about critical infrastructure, it's pretty mission critical that data can be relied upon. And it's pretty critical for the company's reputation that they provide accurate data as well. So say somebody's medical records get corrupted, right? The wrong stuff is on it. You don't want the wrong treatment going to somebody. That's just one example, but there are a lot of ways that sabotaging data integrity can absolutely destroy some reputation. And it's not like ransomware, because there's no way out. They just wanted to upset somebody. So these are the kind of things that really matter. And that's why it's so important to protect your company data and your business application data.
Yeah, we've got some specific use cases that you wanted to share with us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of this is how we would protect, right? This is the enhanced app security posture, where we identify those risky patterns. And then we can also, going back to, hey, we know this guy is going to resign, or we have plans to terminate them, we would adjust the risk scoring on that and user monitoring, right? So that user is flagged as a potentially risky user. We get that extra scrutiny. And then for data loss prevention, the signals that we look for, we can have them automate responses. For example, locking somebody's account out while they're trying to export those files and having an email automated to the manager or something like that, and so that they can investigate and figure it out.
So here's use case number 1, unusual file sharing. Help us understand what this situation is and what you could do to help solve it.
For unusual file sharing, gotcha. So this is where it's kind of one of those anomaly detections. So atypical file sharing, we use UEBA, user and entity behavior analytics, as part of our solutions here in the Microsoft stack. And what that does is it charts what's normal behavior for that user and his peers in the same department or in the same role. So when somebody all of a sudden starts sharing things to somebody in bulk that they don't normally share to, and it's external, it's maybe a Gmail account or some other suspicious signal, then we can do something about that. And if you look closely on the right-hand side of that slide, there's a screenshot where we can show you the customizations available. Right now, we're looking at repeated activity, right? 5 times in 30 minutes. Sometimes you want to say, hey, I don't want to wait for them to prove they're doing something bad 5 times in 30 minutes before I do something. Other people know that when they deploy these kinds of rules that their daily process might trigger a lot of false positives. So that's why you would adjust it sometimes. And then we're targeting a single application here. The app equals Dynamics 365, but you can adjust it for all of your other applications once you onboard them. And then the activity type is sharing of any type. So this is a really powerful tool that you can customize. We have another couple examples in the next few slides that are even more in the weeds. Like look at the filters on this one. So this is a mass download by a single user. And this is where we talk about if it's coming from the application of Dynamics 365, the IP address doesn't equal a Microsoft Azure address, right, for extra scrutiny. And the username is set to any role. And they start to download a lot of stuff that they don't usually do, like 50 repeated activities within 1 minute. That's not normal. That's something that we want to look out for and catch.
But for example, if it was normal for someone, if that's part of their job, you could then change this user setting to say, hey, user is not this person, but anybody else, it would trigger for them, right?
Yeah, and this is the next fun part because there's so many different ways you can exclude a user once you run into something like that. So notice all of the activity types and the filters on the bottom right, the little squares. You can add an exclusion for a user equals and it being a member of a group or a specific user if there's a problem user, right? Or somebody that you know has to do this. And then you can also, if you're just looking for who are the most serious culprits to tackle first, if you just don't know where to start, right? You can adjust the minimum repeated activities and the minutes.
So Ian, how often is an opportunity like this missed in an organization? Is it safe to say that almost everyone that has Dynamics 365 already has something like this set up, or is this something that needs to be manually configured?
This needs to be manually configured. It's available out of the box, but if you don't flip the switch and then, tweak it and adjust some of the activity boxes on the bottom right here, no, these are not just there for you and protecting you.
Okay, yeah. Here, let's go to the next use case, which is conditional access.
Well, something I want to point out too for the past two, those are activities such as a mass download or an export. We can do this with NRT. This is a new thing that they've introduced for near real-time rules, and those rerun every minute. So you can potentially catch somebody before and lock their account out and run the automations against it before the download's finished.
It's excellent. Yeah, that's and in some situations where it's very customer sensitive, patient sensitive, type information, that can be pretty critical to catch that before it becomes a problem. So
time is, a factor for sure.
Absolutely. All right. So tell us about this use case with conditional access.
So conditional access is really powerful. This is where you can make it so that anyone trying to access corporate resources has to meet certain conditions, otherwise they don't get access. And those conditions can vary from what membership they have in terms of group memberships, if they're on a compliant device that maybe is joined to the domain, or maybe one that's not joined to the domain, but it's up to a certain update and has the right security stuff, etc. You can make sure that nobody from suspicious IPs, like coming out of Russia right now, can access your corporate data, like so you can't log into email from a Russian IP, for example, if you do business in DC. That's an unusual case. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. If you zoom in a little bit here, there's a lot of ways you can get very, very customizable with it, get very granular and into the weeds in terms of who it applies to, who it doesn't. Fun fact, though, in about a month, Microsoft is going to roll out a mandatory MFA enforcement via conditional access policy. So make sure that everybody's ready to rock and roll there.
Yeah, excellent. I want to take a break here for a moment and ask another poll question. I'm curious to know how confident people feel in their current Dynamics 365 security posture, especially in light of the information that was just shared here. Would you say that you're extremely confident, somewhat confident, neutral, somewhat unconfident or extremely unconfident. If you're not even sure about it, I would just put the neutral, but maybe it's not your realm and you're just listening for a friend. But I'm very curious to hear what people think and how people are digesting this information. In the meantime, as well, if you haven't already, I would love for you to direct your attention to the chat and put in a story. I would love to hear a story about, maybe it's within your organization or outside your organization, that what happened. What happened in those cases? Is there a situation where you wish you had been protected, or someone that a organization that wish they'd had some of these things in place, and if they had, they would have been a little bit better off. I want to hear those stories and share them. And I think as we all share our best practices together, we can all learn. Correct? Excellent. Then I also curious to know, when it comes to monitoring your business, here's another poll question I'd love to have everyone try is, when it comes to monitoring your business, what tools are you using? Are you using Microsoft Sentinel? Are you using SolarWinds, Alien Vault, Logstash? Maybe you're not sure. Or if you've got another one, I'd love to have you put it in the chat and do that there. And I'm going to take a look here. Looks like we've got maybe a comment or two in the chat. I want to see what we got. Looks like it's just people responding to our polls, so that's great. Most people feel like they're pretty neutral in their there's 12% of our audience is extremely confident, which is great, but most people are neutral, and some are somewhat unconfident, which makes sense. I think anytime I can see or hear about things that could be improved, it always makes me want to learn a little bit more. Well, let's continue on. And Paul, I think this is a question for you. Tell us about Dynamics 365 security and compliance. You're an expert here.
Yeah. So there's a lot of built-in functionality already, which is nice that Dynamics brings. So whether that's some of the role-based security or some of the permission management, things of that nature, it is really a solid foundation to start with. What I like is kind of the layering that comes on top, but when we come in and kind of do some of the security assessment pieces, what we're really looking at is just making sure that foundation is solid all the way through, right? So we look at some of the business unit access, we look at some of how sharing is done, things of that nature. We also cover code reviews, as well as some of the solution management, and then as well as the integrations and kind of where is your data leaving, where is some of the downstream access that can occur within that. So we really do try to start with a very, very solid foundation all the way through, leveraging what the out-of-box features provides, and then but that's just the starting point. So next slide. Really, what's nice about this is that our view is kind of that layered approach, right? And so with everything that we have, really just overall kind of view of security, it's having that layer really is crucial for make sure. That if there is any kind of gap or breach or anything like that, there's other layers that can really kind of make sure to capture that or catch that. And so, like I mentioned, we really do start with that solid D365 foundation, but then we look at bringing in some of the tooling and such that Ian has mentioned around the Microsoft Sentinel and such. So, Ian, you want to kind of talk about some of those next level layers?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do that, though, I love how you touched on defense in depth, right? How there's multiple ways to catch something. And then we're also going to maybe touch on a bit of zero trust here in a bit. On to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Actually, this is the one. Okay, so security configuration, data security and access, monitoring and threat detection. One of the trickiest parts of this, if you're looking at the bottom here, real-time insights to user behavior. We talked about that. Identify suspicious prompts for content generation. That's a fun one that comes into AI, and that's a hot topic on everyone's docket right now. So let's talk about that here in a second. I think somebody has a question. Did I see that right?
Yeah, I wanted to read that for you. I want to make sure I didn't interrupt you too much, but they're asking, one of our attendees wants to know, any kind of audit performed by you as a single shot or on the daily basis for Copilot for sales pre-requirement in order to check, for instance, too wide privs or oversharing of data?
So I think that that's something maybe we don't do on a daily basis, but that's something that you definitely need to keep regular tabs on. It's not a one-shot thing because permissions are constantly changing, ebbing and flowing. People are coming and going. Contractors are getting involved in projects and getting access to resources, things like that, even temporarily. So there's a lot of that's something that you have to constantly stay on top of. Great question, though. And that brings us to our next thing. How do you keep on top of your AI security, and how do you audit stuff for Copilot, right? So here, yeah, exactly, this slide. This is the one I was thinking about a minute ago. So empowering organizations with security for integrated AI solutions like Copilot. These quickly turn into purview conversations because, say, somebody doesn't have access to a document, but Copilot has access to everything. They can ask Copilot for a summary, and it'll spill the beans. So we would want to look for things like suspicious prompts, which is another thing that we can set up. Actually, it's not an out of the box thing, but it's something you can do in Sentinel with your analytics rules. It's what we would look for is suspicious prompts that are trying to trick the AI into divulging data. That's the latest attack surface area now that everybody's paying attention to.
Yeah, that's a big one because there's a lot of people who are like, oh, AI doesn't know that that I'm not allowed to know this, so I'm going to ask all the questions that I'm interested in and see if someone's put up guardrails to prevent it from being able to answer that. And there's ways to protect against it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But like we can go into more detail. But for example, you don't have access to something, but well, you need to give Copilot access to your details for it to work. So you can say, hey, Copilot, how many hours did I spend working on this project this past week? And it'll look through your calendar, etc. But somebody else could ask it the same thing. They don't have access to your calendar, but they can figure out how much time you spent on something by asking it those tricky questions, and they can deduce things. So these are the kind of things that we would watch for. And we get those signals once we integrate it into Sentinel, right? For the full XDR and single kind of unified platform. We get everything sent over to Sentinel, and we can set up analytics rules to watch for those and then flag those users accordingly.
Got another question from our audience today. They ask, are the security controls handled by the application or the security admin?
The security controls, I think what you're referring to are the analytics rules, right? So defining the conditions that should trigger an alert, and then what should be done about the alert if you're talking automation. The security controls can be whatever you want, really. If you're good with KQL, that's what works under the hood. So you can define somebody failing to log in enough times, you'd throw the event ID in there to search for. And if we have Entra ID sending signals to Sentinel with a near real-time rule setup, it'll trigger within a minute of somebody triggering that.
Now, you mentioned Sentinel a couple times here, and from our poll earlier, we had several people mention that they're using Sentinel, but also some people that don't know or undergrad. You give us a quick overview about what Microsoft Sentinel is.
Absolutely. It's a cloud-native security and information event management system, or a SIEM, right? SIEM, you'll see that jargon. And it's also, as part of that SIEM, it includes a SOAR, an SOAR, which is security, orchestration, automation, and response.
We do love our acronyms, don't we?
Right. So it's a SIEM with SOAR as part of it. But what it does is the SIEM part is great. It ingests all of your data, gives you greater insights into what's going on. Fun fact, that's why it's called Cousteau query language, after Jacques Cousteau, the famous deep sea explorer, right? So it's finding things out of the dark. And then what do you do with that? So that's the SOAR component. That's really cool with Sentinel. You can have logic apps integrate to automate against any of your incidents and analytics rules, and automate in one example, we can automate disable. I think I mentioned this, disabling a user's account, automate sending an email to that user's manager, and then appending a note to the incident in Sentinel. So your SOC analyst sees that, knows what's happened, and doesn't have to waste any time. It reduces the alert fatigue and the overhead on your SOC by a huge amount. And part of the key features here, it's data collection at scale, does your threat protection, and then it allows you to do investigation and hunting, and then response automation. You have to get those keywords in on these, right?
Yeah. Got another question from our audience. How often should Dynamics security settings be reviewed and updated?
Oh man, it really depends. If you're depending on your industry regulations, if you're HIPAA or if you're a Swiss bank, it should be very regularly, right? But I would recommend no less than once a quarter. You should have somebody just tick the boxes, make sure nothing has been changed, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, you've got more insight into the internal permissions, right?
Yeah, I was going to say quarterly is definitely typically where we kind of recommend for some, and then to your point, there's some industries that really require a little bit more, but a lot of it as well is just good reporting that kind of come out of it, as well as some of the Sentinel monitoring that you've been talking about is really a crucial way to really kind of get ahead of some of those items. What we sometimes see is the development cycle kind of happen, more things occur on the platform itself, and people kind of forget really around those roles and security permissions, and so people end up with just slightly elevated permissions if they're not staying on top of it. So definitely that quarterly time frame is typically what we recommend. Great questions.
Awesome. And this is okay. Yeah. So investigate. Well, this is how it works, right? It's this is the flow. We'll collect, detect, investigate, and respond. So when we talk collect, we ingest all of your data from your business applications. We've got integrations to all of the third-party integrations through Sentinel. Then we do detections. We've got our analytics rules. And then we can investigate with advanced hunting and KQL. We can write queries to try and figure out blast radiuses and things like that. And then respond. That's my favorite part, is automating things with playbooks, such as access blocking or forcing a password reset, forcing to re-authenticate through MFA, things like that. Quick wins. And Dylan, is there anything you want to throw in on this one for the workflow here? Or use cases?
One thing I was going to add, as we get Paul involved. Thank you. Yeah, almost. But no, so I would add that, especially for the last one, right? So we can bounce off the question, right? How often we should review settings. Anytime that there's a change, right? One of the best features of Sentinel is to go in and say, hey, we saw somebody that escalated their permissions. All right, let's go review what settings were changed so we can go back and maybe close the gap. Right? That's the whole thing that you mentioned at the very beginning, right? Is what is that security gap? Because often, right, we've all been engineers before. We've changed settings just so we can go get something done, but we forget that we even change the settings. So go close the gap and make sure that we're always monitoring and then responding, right, to your point on what those changes were.
Fantastic.
So tell us about Zero Trust, because I know this is a really big, I mean, we talked about this as we're preparing for this at length. I'm curious to know if this is an unfamiliar topic to our audience, and if not, this is something that, it's funny because we were joking about how good communication should be built on trust, and this is in this case, good security is built on Zero Trust, right?
Absolutely. So this is how the KMicro house is built. Zero Trust. Well, these are the pillars, right, that hold everything up and how we stay secure and how we secure our clients. So the first principle or the first pillar is identity. You've got to connect in your Entra ID, your on-prem Active Directory, your Okta, whatever it is you're using to get those signals in. And protect your users and your identities. Then you want to, and that, by the way, part of that is authorization and authentication. Should they be able to, and what can they access when they get it? And then devices, right? We want to talk about, is their device up to the latest Windows update and isn't susceptible to certain vulnerabilities before you try to access this corporate data? Is it joined to a domain, for example? Is it on a secure Wi-Fi? Is it on a public Wi-Fi? You can get real granular. Network, right? We talked about that, getting on the public Wi-Fi, corporate Wi-Fi, home Wi-Fi. There's a whole different way you can treat each different one. And then we want to talk about application workloads. This is a lesser known one, but it's going to become a huge deal, especially next month. Everybody's going to be moving from their user account-based service accounts, right, for automation over to application workloads. This helps to keep your application data and your automation secure regardless of where they're hosted. It's going to be critical in a couple of weeks. And then data, just protecting your data. Make sure you've got your, depending on your industry regulations, you want to have your data encrypted at rest, in transit, what have you. assume the worst, right? That's the principle of zero trust. And the biggest part of this is you want to build this house in such a way that it's the opposite of the Titanic. So you know how the walls didn't go all the way up to the top, so once water came in, it just slowly went right. Zero trust and defense in depth is we build those walls all the way to the top. That way, one ballast can fill up with water and the whole ship doesn't sink.
Yeah, a great question from one of our attendees today. Is there any extra value by integrating with Defender for identity?
Absolutely. Defender for Identity is particularly useful if you've got on-prem Active Directory, and that extends your cloud protection into your on-prem environment, and you get the same kind of risky user analysis and things like that. And you get all of those signals into Sentinel as well. The really fun thing with that is you got to create a directory service account. I don't know how technical everybody wants to get, but that's real fun. You need to be able to have read access into your entire Active Directory environment, including deleted objects. So it's kind of tricky when you're setting up, but that way you can look at signals coming from things being undeleted or looking for things that were deleted that shouldn't be. And then Defender for Identity is really great because on top of all of that, it does deep packet network inspection. So it uses kind of not Wireshark, but whatever the software under the hood for that is for deep packet inspection. And so it can tell if requests are coming from a bogus domain controller or a bad source, etc., and send all of those signals in and provide an extra layer of protection. Yes, Defender for Identity can absolutely improve your position here.
That's excellent. I love all the questions that are coming in right now. Please continue to put those questions in the chat so we can address all of them. Paul, this one might be for you. Maybe Ian, you wanted to weigh in on it as well. But what are the limitations of other D365 security assessments that are out there compared to Fortify D365? And what are organizations risking by not fortifying D365 per KMicro's recommendations?
Yeah, great question. So we kind of, when we were looking out at kind of what's out there already, some of what we saw was either very focused on Dynamics or very focused on security platforms and just kind of leveraging those. But there wasn't anybody really kind of looking at both, and then especially that gap that Ian kind of mentioned. So what we like to have is we like to have the CRM admin as well as the security kind of team involved, so they can actually kind of talk with one another, learn about some of these technologies that can be there, and then collectively discuss about some of the ways that we can leverage some of these additional layers to provide some of the visibility, whether auditing or compliance related items, to kind of get that full picture and have the full robust tool set available to them. So that's really where we see it's a little bit different, is that we kind of have that dual focus that makes sure we're kind of building, addressing things at really the proper layer. And then
Ian or Dylan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I was going to bring up the fact that for us, like a lot of Paul's point, we are playing kind of the middle ground, right? So a lot of organizations, even Microsoft, realizing that business apps are posing probably the biggest risk right now to most organizations. But again, it's where the money's stored, right? It's where your customer data ends up being the most valuable resource you have as a business. So one thing about us, right, at KMicro that we're different than most organizations is we're also part of the MISA and Microsoft designated areas, right? MISA being Microsoft's Intelligent Security Association. So we actually have direct access to architects while they're building out their current solutions, and we can kind of take it one step further, right? So we can get with the ENs and really smart engineers and build out other things that fit the direct need that we see in the market.
Excellent. We've got another question in here. How do you protect applications other than Microsoft Dynamics? Ian, you want to take that one?
This is a good one. Yeah, so the way that we build out our analytics rules and our logic applications, they're modular. So even though we can implement an application, a logic app from the Entra ID solution, we can trigger that against an analytics rule that runs against, say, Okta, and then have it carry out the same stuff. It's all how you do the integration, and that's where the fun part is. That is part 4 of the that's the application workload here. You want to make sure that the logic app is using a system managed identity that has the privileges to do just what it needs to.
Well, that brings us in. It's a good transition to our funded security briefing. I think there's probably quite a few people here that are thinking, how do I know? And even one of our poll questions was asking, do I know if my Dynamics 365 is secure? They're not sure. We're offering a funded security briefing during which we are going to help you uncover what are those gaps in your Dynamics 365 applications and your instance. We'll help you identify the risk of those data breaches and the potential operational disruptions that they might create for you. And we're going to analyze your compliance posture, especially in regard to your industry's regulatory standards. You might be in an industry that's highly regulated, in which case there might be things that even you aren't aware of that you are now putting you at risk. Or maybe you're in a less regulated industry and maybe aren't aware that there's some regulations in there that you can and should be aware of and being compliant with. We'll meet with you. It takes about 90 minutes and give you a tailored quote for our expertise and any security needs to meet your specific situation. So I've got a little poll question for you here. And let me make that live. I'm curious to know from our audience if, at the end of this webinar here, what are you interested in? How can we help you? And choose all but apply here. We've got a free ebook about security that we could send you. Perhaps you have specific follow-up questions and you'd like one of our experts to reach out to you personally and have a discussion. Maybe you want to connect with our technical team and ask some really deep questions that we couldn't get to on this broader webinar. Or just like I described this funded security briefing, maybe you want to schedule that free briefing right away and get started here. So go ahead and choose all but apply, and then click submit, and that will help us to understand how we can support you and get you started. And of course, our goal is to support you in the way that you need it and the way you want it. We're not here to pressure you into anything. We're not here to scare you, but we do want to make you aware that there are challenges out there and there are solutions to those challenges. And KMicro is the right partner to help you, resolve those if and when you want. Ian, really appreciate all the hard work you did putting this presentation together. Paul, appreciate the feedback and the content that you shared as well. And Dylan, really appreciate your insight. All three of you really contributed well to this, and really appreciate all of the participation that we had from our audience today. Thank you again for posting in your questions and participating in our polls. That is the end of our webinar today. And again, if you've got some additional content or questions that you need, we'll be reaching out to you and letting you know what we can do to support you and help you. We did record this session, and we'll be sending that out as a follow-up email so you can rewatch it, share it with someone else. We hope you'll share it with others. And please don't forget to come follow us on social media. Come connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to be able to, spend some time with you. We'd love to be able to, engage in some conversation. If you want to call us directly, our phone number's up on the screen right there. We've also got an email. You can email us at info@kmicro.com or visit our website. And of course, if you happen to be in Costa Mesa, California, or the Irvine area, we'd love to have you stop by and meet you in person. So there's our address there as well. But thank you again to everyone. Appreciate all the participation. Paul, Ian, Dylan, thank you again for the hard work. And we will see everyone on our next webinar.